Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Micha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. So another interesting game from the recently ended European Team Championship between Nikolas Theodorou and Teimour Radjabov. Let's see what happened. Nikolas Theodorou had white pieces and he started with e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and we have Petrov defense. Knight captures on e5 or d4 are the most popular moves. D4 was played in the game, knight captures pawn on e4, and here white usually recaptures e-pawn with the knight, but here in this game d-pawn captures pawn on e5, so white goes for a very sharp variation. Bishop to c5 was played, targeting this pawn on f2. Of course, with bishop to e3, white can defend, but after the trade, white gets the double pawns along the e file. Instead, bishop to c4 was played, and now both players have thrown down the gauntlets, as they say. Knight captures on f2 was played, forking both queen and rook. But not only white doesn't care, white responded with bishop captures pawn on f7 check, sacrificing the bishop. Now black doesn't have to capture the bishop, but after, for example, king to e7, then queen d5, defending the bishop. Preparing bishop to g5, skewering the king, gaining the queen. And if king goes back to f8, then queen to c5 check, king captures on f7, king captures knight on f2, white is a piece up, and with black king in the open, black is simply losing. Okay, so in the game, king captures bishop on f7, queen to d5 check, king again has more options. But after king to e7, bishop to g5 skewers the king. After king to f8, queen captures bishop with check. So king to e8 or king to g6 are the main options. King to g6 was played in the game. Queen captures on c5, knight captures on h1. So white is a whole rook down. Okay, this knight can easily be captured, but white doesn't have time for that, as he has to keep the initiative. Knight to c3 was played, and now h6, creating an escape square. Knight goes to d5. Now black has to be careful with this knight to f6 jump. White can cover h7 and g8 square, and also sort of tactics can come up. For example, if black plays a random move, let's say a6, then queen goes to c4, and after, for example, not so random move, knight to c6, then knight to h4 check. Now here queen should capture this knight on h4, because if queen doesn't capture, then king has three options. After king to h7, then knight to f6 check. All squares are taken. And here queen definitely has to capture this knight, losing decisive material, because if g-pawn captures knight on f6, then queen to f7 is checkmate. Okay, if king goes to f7, then knight to c7, discover check. If king to e7, then knight to g6 is mate. If king goes to f8, again knight to g6 is mate. If black plays d5, then e-pawn captures en passant. It's check. Bishop goes to e6 defending. Queen captures on e6. king to f8 and knight goes to g6 is checkmate. There are other variations, but this is just to illustrate the complexity of the situation. Okay, let's go back to our game. In the game, rook to e8 was played. So black is creating a place to hide his king. White continues with queen to d4, preparing queen to e4. Then black king won't be able to escape to h7. So king to h7 was played immediately. Black king, of course, black king wants to escape to safety. But now comes a very stunning move. Bishop captures pawn on h6. So white tries to annihilate black's defense. Of course, black has to capture the bishop somehow, because bishop to g5 trapping the queen is now possible. If, for example, black would capture bishop with king, then queen to e3 check. King, let's say, goes to h7, knight goes to g5 check, king to g8, and now queen to f4. e7 and f7 squares are taken, so queen to f7 would be deadly. Rook to f8 doesn't help. Then queen goes to h4, and here black can prevent the mate only by capturing knight on g5, losing decisive material advantage. There are some other sub-variations, but in all of them black is lost. Okay, so in the game, g-pawn captures bishop on h6. White wants to play knight to f6. Maybe not so much for the fork, both king and the rook, but probably to create a mating net. But if white jumps with knight to f6 immediately, then queen simply captures and e-pawn cannot recapture because it's pinned by the rook. So first, white castles queen side. Rook goes to e6, avoiding the fork, and now knight goes to f6 check. You might think that by sacrificing the exchange, black can save himself. Well, let's see. After a rook captures a knight on f6, e-pawn recaptures on f6, and now knight goes to f2, attacking the rook. Now black is still 2 pieces up, so white doesn't have time to grab the knight, as a queen would capture this unpleasant pawn on f6, ending white's attack. Instead, rook to e1 would have to be played, preparing rook to e7 with deadly attack. After knight to c6, preventing rook to e7. Then queen to f4, preparing queen to f5 with deadly mating threats. So after d5, preventing queen to f5, then f7, white is going to promote. The only way to prevent it is by playing bishop goes to d7, and now rook to e8. Now bishop cannot capture because queen has to protect a f8 square. So after queen captures rook on e8, f-pawn recaptures on e8. If rook recaptures, then queen to f7, white gains a piece. And after bishop recaptures on e8, then knight to h4, white is going to grab additional piece, and with queen versus rook and a piece, white is simply winning in this position. In the game, king goes back to h8. White wants to play queen to f4, grabbing this h6 pawn with mate in 1. But if white plays queen to f4 immediately, then queen to f8, defending this pawn on h6. Black queen enters the game and black king is suddenly protected. So knight goes to h4 was played, preventing this queen to f8, because knight to g6, forks king, and whatever happens to be on f8 square. d6 was played, preparing knight to d7, removing this unpleasant knight on f6. White continues with queen to f4. Mate in 1 is the threat, so king goes to g7, queen to g4, check. There isn't much to be done here. If king goes to f8 or f7, it's pretty much similar. Queen goes to g6, check, king to f8, queen to g8, check, king to e7, and knight to g6 is checkmate. So in the game, king goes to h8 was played, knight goes to g6 check, king to g7 is the only option, and again we have mate in 3. Mate in 3 starts with knight goes to f8 check. If king goes, for example, to h8, then queen to g8 is checkmate. If king captures knight on f8, then queen to g8 check, king to e7, queen to g7 is checkmate. And realizing that all is lost, in this position, Teimour Radjabov resigned the game. So I hope you like this game. I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.